found myself asking some deep questions this morning. Like existential questions, like who am I? Where am I going? And I didn't feel inside a really strong answer. Like I'm doing this or I'm headed into this direction. There was just kind of emptiness, like a void. And it just didn't sit very well inside of me. Kind of scary. And I had to sit with it. Didn't take long because, well, in the past I would have sat with that longer. It would have just dragged me down. But by the end of it, I came to the conclusion that trust and faith. And I don't mean in the sense of God, and each individual has to ask themselves that question, but like we recently had this current pandemic kickoff. I've gotten to spend more time with my 1-year-old daughter than I would have possibly have been able to before the situation, because I was working so much, 6 days a week, really full schedule as a personal trainer and a business owner, and there was no way. And now I get whole days with both my kids by myself, and the intimacy that I have with them now, and just feeling so connected to them, really important to me. And my wife, I mean, we have gotten to spend more time these past several months, 5-6 months, than we possibly would have been able to before this. So there are a lot of really, for me, important connections and relationships that came from what's happening in the world around us. Now, I didn't start off by thinking, oh, how can I be da-da-da-da. I started off with this existential dread and this overwhelm and this void that felt so yucky inside. And then I started thinking about the trust and the faith that I needed to have as a father, as a husband, as a business owner, as a human being. How we respond to these milestones are going to live in our lives forever. We're forever going to react and respond to these monumentous occasions and decide how we measured up to our ideal and what we wanted to accomplish. And man, so I'm sitting with this yucky feeling, and it's just feeling really, ugh. And then I felt the trust and the faith, and it's like there was no yucky feeling. It all evaporated. It disappeared, if you will. And then I thought, let me try this other. I thought it was really interesting that this feeling completely evaporated. The question was gone, even. So I thought, let me ask another question. And this question became, we have gratitude. And that's when I started searching back recently through events and saying, well, what can I be grateful for? And it reaffirmed and reinforced what I was mentioning before in terms of the opportunity to spend time with my kids, one-on-one, get to know my 1-year-old daughter, now my 3-year-old son, my wife at this stage in our lives. I mean, we're almost going on 10 years being together next year. And so a lot changes over the course of someone's life if you factor in a decade of time. So it kind of leaves me with this desire to want to share, and also this reflection point to say, hey, life happens sometimes, and the way life happens and the moment that life happens and asks us to be so flexible. This morning, my routine was totally, I wake up at 4 or something just to make sure I get in some specific things for me that I find to be super nourishing to start my day. And they were just interrupted at every every opportunity. But then there was this sense of clarity, because when we get interrupted from our routines, we have this free floating energy, I think, in your mind and in your body, where you have this excess, this extra, and you're going to gravitate towards some questions or some areas of your life that you haven't exactly answered yet. You may not have the clarity on it. Even if it's vague and ambiguous, you might have a degree of certainty that you'll understand it or you'll figure it out. That's a little different than having a defined plan and not buying into it. But whether you have a plan or you don't have a plan, to some degree it doesn't matter, because you're gonna have times when you have no idea what's coming, no clue. And you really can't plan on those moments. I mean, sure, cognitively you can say, I'm gonna plan for the worst and I'm gonna hope for the best and I'm gonna imagine all these worst outcomes, but then think about that for a second. Then in terms of a self-fulfilling prophecy, you're looking for negative things to happen. Unless you also look for the positive, potential positive consequences or positive outcomes. I'm more of that frame of mind. I like to focus on what could potentially be a good thing. If these actions happen in an order, then you can potentially see this as a positive outcome. You hope for it. You can trust for it. Maybe that's how you want to choose to lead yourself. And there's another part to that equation, I think, what really swelled up this morning, and that's do what you can with what's right in front of you. Whether that's the first thing first or the next best thing, if you meet a lot of resistance, it's still thinking, trusting, having faith in your future, having faith in now, having faith in this afternoon, tomorrow, this evening, later this morning. That question of faith and trust. And what sometimes when I think about faith or trust, I think of the negative things that have happened in my life that have been so humbling, that just teach me that in some occasions and in some contexts, I have no power over my life, zero. And so when I think about the idea of trust and faith, whoa, it's deep and painful. And so you might ask yourself, well, how do I think past that? And I think that's a practice. I think that's patience, and patience is a loaded concept. It's pushing off instant gratification. It's pushing off having direct feedback or a lot of directness. If you were going to plant a seed, you would have to nurture it. It would have to get sunlight. It would have to get water. And it would do its thing underneath the surface before anybody could see it, before you could see it. It's happening in the earth. I think patience is a very similar idea, that you got to do your actions in the world that kind of feel fulfilling in and of themselves. You know, and an example of that, if you read and you make reading tough, it's not exactly exciting on its own unless you read an exciting book. If you exercise, if you're exercising and just going, what am I doing here? Why am I exercising? This isn't fun, it's not rewarding. You're not going to continue it. It's not going to be fulfilling in and of itself. So sure, you could frame it under the concept of patience and reinforce yourself. I know this will work. I know this will work. I know this will work. But as a personal trainer, as somebody whose profession it is to help people make change and reinforce it, and also share with people the exciting parts of exercising. Exercising is very exciting. It teaches you a lot about your body. It totally gets you out of your head, into your body. There's a patience that begins to swell up based on the work, but what I'm implying is that the work should be interesting. And if you can't make it interesting, there's a concept called decision fatigue. I think you can make it fatigue, self-talk fatigue, narrative fatigue, or just bullshit detector. I mean, there's only so much you can tell yourself if you don't have any experience with it. Like when I tell a client I'm super excited and I can see certain things in their movement, it's because I can. Because I've done it 1,000 times with that movement, with myself, or with hundreds of other people, or thousands of people at some point. There's an affect, a tone, a look in my eyes, a feeling in my body that's the truth. And you can, as the other person, you can feel that. And that's where now more than ever, there are people selling their services or their products or whatever it is online, and it's because we're networking as a community, as a larger community, as a planetary community, or as a larger America or a larger world economy. However you see it, we're just realizing we're all much more connected than you think. And to get support from an expert in a certain domain is super good, because then you don't have to fake it until you make it. You don't have to feel like an imposter when you're trying to accomplish something and you have no idea if that's the right course of action. It's so much easier to work with somebody who's an expert at it. They can save you energy, they can save you time, and honestly, they can save you money. In the sense of, if you just take the domain that I'm in, my scope, it's training. Well, training encompasses teaching people about an exercise. It also teaches or encompasses the idea of teaching others or coaching them how to read the right signals. You know, the metrics are very subjective. So in one sense, the meta of what I do is coaching people to coach themselves. And if somebody were teaching you any skill, what they're hopefully also doing as you acquire a new skill set is teaching you how to know when you've acquired it. And that's really important. That's another question I was asking myself this morning. It's, how do you know when you've done a good job? Like, what are some examples? Like, say you have something you want to achieve now. You want to lose weight or stay in shape or see your abs or commit to a program, or branching it outside of just training, coaching. Say you want to develop a skill at work, or I don't know, there's a lot of skills. You want to learn how to have better relationships with people. You want to learn how to listen to people better. All these things break down into certain skill sets. And if you want to learn those skills, you kind of have to know when it's right. Like, when do you know you're doing it right? And so I started asking myself, when have I done something really right in my life and it just totally worked? And what were the things I was listening to, or listening with my eyes? Like, I could see it and I knew that was it. Or I could feel it in my body and I was listening to my body. Or tasted right, or in certain occasions I was waiting for feedback. So I'm asking you to ask yourself, like, when did you know something was effortless and wonderful and it just worked? Well, there's something behind the scenes there that's worth investigating and understanding, as it'll teach you a level about yourself below the surface. Now, here's something I'm coming to understand, that I'm biased towards myself. When I work with clients and I teach them, I'm totally unbiased. I can listen with my complete heart wide open, discern things mentally, and give somebody else guidance. When it comes to myself, I have certain biases because I have certain preconceived notions about what I want to be able to do, or I have certain preconceived notions of what I can't do. And when you work with someone else who hopefully is I don't know, to use these vague terms, like a clear vessel, or it can be a mirror, that aside, you know if somebody's listening to you, and there are certain qualities that teach you that somebody else is listening to what you are saying past the surface. That feels good, and that's hard to do with yourself. And this is another idea of learning to listen to yourself and your good experiences. That's trying to really teach you how to listen to a level below the surface for yourself and investigate these experiences as they can be really powerful. Oftentimes I work with golfers for lots of reasons, and one of the things I promote to almost all of them, read some powerful works, whatever that is for you. You know, some people like lots of things. Anything that evokes the sense of positive feelings. And then write down, describe, tell somebody about your perfect swing, your perfect play. How did you address the ball? What were the things that you were doing in that moment right before you went up? And kind of what that does is it puts a reference structure on your timeline of your history. So you kind of investigate the past. And by default, it starts to set your brain up to look for these things into the future. Because you have a reference behind you, you're going to now have a reference in front of you. You can notice that, but any relationship you've ever had, if it's been a positive one in the past, then you know what sort of relationship you want to seek in the future. What sort of relationship you want to find later on. Or a negative experience, like you had a relationship that really taught you the type of person you don't want to be in relationship with. That programs into the future, okay? So there's this kind of 2 data points that create a degree of relevance. So by asking a golfer to highlight, describe, and essentially embody, right? Like what happens in you, happens to you, happens through you, and then it facilitates this idea of utilizing the self-fulfilling prophecy and your brain to target in and look for in your environment, especially when it's a specific context like golf or coaching or food or relationships with people or exercise. And you want to know what to feel for. You need to know what to feel and find in the dark to kind of frame the doing, to give you the feedback and the reassurance that you're doing it right. Like, what does it feel like to be full? Well, I wouldn't exactly teach somebody to be or to look for being full when they eat unless they've had an experience of being full. And then you might have them describe it. What did it feel like to feel full? Where were you? Did you feel your belly touch your shirt, or did you just feel like, did you move your body in a certain way? Did you drink some water? And then as you start to describe this event, it becomes an event in your life that you can use as a reference. It's like, another way to think of it is like the reference in the back of a book doesn't give you the whole book of knowledge. It kind of gives you the quote, or it gives you the concept. Like you flip it through, you look in the back and you say, oh, this person quoted this study or this book. What they're really saying is, that whole thing adds up to this point, and this point is important. So if you go back and you revisit when you had dedication to an exercise program, what was your life like? And you can say, I didn't think about it. I just made a commitment to being accountable at a certain time and in a certain place. And then I did it. And then I knew how that fit in, because then I stopped and I went and I got back to X activity. Great. So you know that if you need to figure out how to exercise each day, you won't. In order for you to figure out how you exercise each day most successfully, you kind of have to reference your past, and you know that you need to make an appointment, and you know that you need to be accountable. There's no other way around it. So essentially, it boils down to this point. To be successful, you kind of have to look at where you have been successful. And what started off for me as existential dread this morning, asking such large questions that I thought I should have been able to describe with words, that created this vacuum inside of me, completely changed as I thought about and felt trust and faith. Like if you're looking at any sort of wall near you, you know there's something on the other side. That's a quick example to understand what it means to feel trust and faith. And then gratitude. So trust, faith, and gratitude completely negate and fill up existential dread. And that's what I discovered this morning. And thanks for listening to my ramblings, and I hope that this benefits you in some great way.